Hey guys, Richard Constable here. So yeah, today I just wanted to talk about group guitar classes and the power of group guitar classes. Just wondering if any of you guys are actually teaching groups for your private guitar school. So I don't mean if you teach at university or conservatory, that is in larger groups, but I meant more in your personal guitar teaching. So a lot of people do one-to-one who I've spoken to. And I remember when I kind of got to a point where all my one-to-one slots were taken up, and I was very scared to actually go into group classes because I thought, what happens if they don't like each other? All these worries were coming into my head about the negative sides of it. Will they like each other? Will it actually work? Will I be able to teach, give them enough attention? Blah, 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 blah. But what I've realized is that it makes a huge difference. It can be, it's not to say that it's foolproof, that it's never ever going to go wrong, because sometimes you do get someone who's way ahead of others, and if you're trying to explain what an E minor chord is to one person and the other one wants to solo throughout the five pentatonic shapes, then if you spend so much attention on one person, there's such a discrepancy, then it can be tricky. Or if you get one quiet person and one really loud person, and they're not a good loud person, they're like a disruptive loud person or a kid, then they're the two situations that I've found that the group classes only lasted so long. But they still lasted, I don't know, a good 6 months before it got too much. But that was, my inexperience was included in that. I didn't kind of prepare them enough for that, or I didn't try change. I should have tried changing their group times and things like that, but I just thought, no, it's fine. I'll just keep going. So those issues do come around, but on the flip side to that, I've found that a lot of people stay in contact. They like to jam outside of classes. That's really powerful. No, that's not kind of number one. You get this kind of peer group relationship. So people get to meet other guitarists. They might be similar age, have similar interests, and they just love guitar as much as you. So they've suddenly got a buddy who they didn't have before in their area. If you're face to face, in a local community. If they're online, that's again, they can chat over the phone or whatever and hang out and jam. So there's lots of benefits there. The other one is, you can jam just you and the other person if that's your style. Maybe classical is slightly different. It's more like you learn a piece and then, blah, blah. But for kind of rock and pop teachers and other teachers, maybe blues, things like that, where you have a bit more freedom to jam, I've found that if you jam with your student, it's great. But if they jam with other people their own age and they're similar level, they kind of look at each other and they're like, wow, we're actually doing this is actually real. If it's just with you, they kind of expect you to be able to do it. But when they start doing it together, it creates this like powerful relationship. And I just think back to myself, some of the best relationships I've had is people I've connected to through music. So I've got a couple of my best mates. I'm in a band with them still since it's already been 14, 15 years or something. And they're like my best mates, and I like to jam with them and hang out, whatever. My wife's a musician as well. She's a pianist and singer. So we connect through music in that way as well. So really powerful, the power of music, as they say. So what other benefits are there? It's social. It adds a bit of, friendly competition. Sometimes if one person's practiced a bit more and they've completed, whatever riff or piece that you're going through, and the other person is slightly behind, then it gives them a kick, and they think, well, I better practice this week. Okay, some people aren't that competitive, so they just doesn't really bother them. But I've found with a lot of people there, especially some of the kids, they're like, no, I want to be the best. I want to complete this and move on to the next bit, because we've got a gamified system that we follow. So just adding that competition, so they kind of look and be like, okay, that's inspiring me to move forward because they're on the, they've been playing about the same time as me. So peer learning. So sometimes if we've got a group of 3 or 4 and one of them's like, oh, what are we doing? I don't understand. Then the person next to them can start explaining to them. And you might have found, as well as me, when you start teaching, you have to explain things in detail and you have to, articulate what you're doing. Where before you were teaching, you would just kind of play the guitar and you wouldn't always think about exactly you wouldn't necessarily think about your exact hand position and how you're doing it until you start actually having to explain. And also different questions start getting your brain going in different ways. And I've found that when they're teaching other students, it ingrains in their brain as well. So that's another powerful, a bit of peer learning. And yeah, playing in a band context. So for the concerts that we did at Christmas, we had a lot of the groups in 2s, 3s, 4s, all playing together. So they all had to learn their parts. So it's got an ensemble feature. That's another powerful element, especially if they're not in a band. If some of them are in a band and they've got a drummer and a bass player and a singer they play with, but for a lot of them they just play in their bedroom, which is fine. You can be a bedroom guitar player, but I think it's really nice when you connect with others, and especially if you're learning a piece and you're learning the different parts and playing together, it just creates a really great atmosphere. So another element is, for some group classes, they're longer. I used to do half-an-hour group classes, which were fine. We were quite militant with the timing. It was like 5 minutes warm-up, 10-minute skill, 10-minute skill, 5-minute song. But now we've moved into, and if sometimes felt a bit rushed, which is fine because people are still practicing, still learning, moving forward. The benefit of the half-an-hour lesson is that they would have a finite amount of things to practice. So when they came back next week, it was a very manageable amount to practice. You could see that they improved. Now we've moved to the 1-hour classes. They've got more time, but they sometimes will have too much to practice. So then when they come back, they've only practiced 1 or 2 of the things out of the 4 or 5 that you managed to put in. So, there's pluses and minuses to both. Ideally a 40-minute, 45-minute lesson might be best, but I think based on the way time works, half an hour, just being on the hour for your classes, I think makes a big difference. Whereas if you're doing 45 minutes and someone's got a 7:45 lesson and then they've got, a 20 to 5 lesson, it can start getting confusing, where if it's always on the half hour or the hour, it's a lot easier to process for me personally, and I think with other people as well. So they're just some of the benefits that I've found with teaching groups. And I think the main benefit for the teacher is that, number one, you're able to teach more people in the same amount of time. If you're doing 1-to-1, 1-hour lessons all over the week, you can probably max out at, let's just say you did 40 lessons, 40 hours. But then you've got the prep and all the other stuff. Even if it's a little bit of prep, you'll still be doing a few hours a week extra on top of that. So you could end up being really busy. You might get a decent wage from it, but you'd be maxed out. So if you've got, I don't know, something going on, you might not be able to pay a teacher to cover you. But if you've got a group class and you're doing 20 hours, but you've got 2 people in each group, that's the same amount of students, 40, but you're in half the amount of time. And if you've got 3 students, 4 students, you kind of maximize your time and leverage your time a lot better. And if you're able to collect more cash per class, then you can outsource it to a teacher, and so then you can try and build up the school and teach the hours that you want to teach, depending on what your lifestyle is and what you want. So that's the benefits to the teacher. But the main thing I think with the group teaching is that you have to be a little bit prepared. If you've got a set formula for each class, and if you've got a set thing that you do, that can be really helpful, especially if you've got a method to follow. Because then you can just be like, okay, they're all on level 2, they're all on level 3, and you can just go through that, or grade 1, 2, or 3, or whatever you're doing. Then you won't have to sit there tabbing things out and writing everything out by hand every single time. Obviously, you'll build a repertoire over time, and you can build up your own method based on the songs that you've used. But I found that if you've got a method, it kind of takes that out. You don't have to do the extra, too much extra stuff. So even if you've got an advanced student, intermediate, and a beginner, let's just say you're doing the C major scale, you could do 1 octave with the beginner, or even the first 2-3 notes if they're really, really beginner. The intermediate, you could do 2 octaves or do the pentatonic C major. And then with the advanced, you could do all 5 positions, and try and find all the C's and play the first octave. You can be quite clever with it. So if you've got a method just to kind of anchor you, then you can just base it all off that rather than coming up with new stuff every single week. And yeah, it's important with the groups to ask what they actually want to learn, because you want to mix in, as a teacher-led class, you don't want it all to be student-led. If it's all student-led, then yeah, they'll be happy. But if your whole life is student-led, then you can end up going into all these random rabbit holes. But if you're meant to be the expert, so you need to guide your students, and if they want to learn a song, that's great. You can add that into the mix, but I think it should be teacher-led, so skills-based at least half the time, if not more, so that when they do come to play the songs, they understand everything. Learning how to read tabs, it's obviously big, reading music. Yeah, so that's all I would say for that, and I hope you've enjoyed this live stream. Catch it anytime, but they're the benefits of group classes for the student and the teacher. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Any questions, just drop them in the comments, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.